Well, it seems to me that the United Nations, first and foremost, needs to put an end to the violence. And if it requires to have a peacekeeping force to actually go in Tripoli and separate the warring factions, that would be what would be expected from the United Nations Security Council, not to refer a leader like Gaddafi, who is obviously not listening to reason and who is butchering his own people, calling them rats and all kinds of other names. This individual is not going to go about and surrender himself to the International Criminal Court. I'm reminded of the fact that in Sierra Leone, it took so many years to get a hold of Mr. Taylor, Charles Taylor, and eventually Mr. Taylor was taken to the International Criminal Court, and this has been dragging on and on and on. Meanwhile, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people perished in Sierra Leone. Are we going to see the same thing in Libya? And I'm afraid that this resolution, while it sounds very nice and very laudable, in fact, it does not really rise to the occasion. There are people dying in the streets of Tripoli, and it seems it's about time that the international community puts some teeth in this resolution.
Do you think that at the very least it might encourage those elements of the regime still supporting Gaddafi to break with him and sort of speed up the fall of the regime?
Well, I mean, eventually, obviously, the people around him are going to be isolated further and further. And I don't know whether the Libyans have a Masada complex, that is, to go out with the last individual. But even if Gaddafi has a few loyal supporters hanging on to his coattails, they're not going to surrender that easily. Now, presumably, that would be the best solution, whereby he will be totally isolated and he will have no choice but surrender. But surrender to whom? I mean, this is the real question. Gaddafi has isolated himself from his own population, and his army is abandoning him, his population is abandoning him, and the people who are around him right now are going to probably die with him.
All right, Joseph Kachichian, thanks for your thoughts on this. Well, there's no definitive count of the number of people killed during the Libyan uprising, but Ban Ki-moon says more than 1,000 people have been killed already. Libya's deputy ambassador to the UN says the number is more like thousands. And with Gaddafi threatening to open up weapons depots to arm civilians, there are fears of more deaths to come. Well, Gaddafi has repeatedly said he will fight to the end, house to house, until the last man standing. Fighting in the city of Benghazi alone in the east has claimed several hundred lives. It's been a particularly brutal battlefield of this uprising. Tony Bertley went to meet the people there.
More than 40 years of iron-fisted rule virtually over, and Libya's second city, Benghazi, is still celebrating. The old and the young taking to the streets to embrace a new era.
This is feeling I had never, ever been felt before.
It's liberation, but at a price. People here say that more than 750 were killed in the uprising, over 1,000 wounded. This is the coffin of 64-year-old Saad Zoué, a bus driver shot dead by Gaddafi loyalists, a simple man who wanted something many take for granted, freedom and democracy.
He was only a driver. He had nothing to do with Gaddafi.
His anger is shared by millions who are now finally able to speak out about the oppression and brutality of their leader.
All the people, they used to work with Gaddafi, they're out. We need them out. We need a new system.
To cheers and rapturous applause, a pre-Gaddafi Libyan flag was unrolled on a government building in the centre of Benghazi. Gaddafi may still be in power, but here they feel their suffering at his hands is almost over.
There is a tremendous sense of jubilation here, a tremendous sense of freedom and liberation. It's an electric atmosphere, you can feel it all around. But there is a small note of apprehension. Gaddafi's elite brigades and his mercenaries are about 400 kilometres from here. That's just over a 3-hour drive. And the Libyan leader is showing no signs of going just yet.
The uprising was aimed against the state apparatus. Police buildings were burned, and the heavy weapons used as the arm of oppression have been turned into souvenir props.
Libya, Libya!
Above it all, they shout Libya, at peace with their beloved country, but at war with their leader. And all eyes are now on Tripoli. With most of eastern Libya in the hands of the opposition, The momentum is growing and forces are now building for an assault against the remaining Gaddafi strongholds. In Benghazi, they no longer say good morning. They say instead new beginning. For them, it has begun. For the capital and a few other towns, they'll have to wait for just a little while longer. Tony Bertley, AlJazeera, Benghazi, Libya.
Well, protesters are gathering in Bahrain for another opposition march on Sunday. It follows a rally in the capital on Saturday night where the country's opposition leader addressed thousands of his supporters. Hassan Shaima called for the government to respond to the people's demands for far-reaching reforms. The return of the senior Shia politician from exile is expected to boost ongoing anti-government protests. Well, Mohammed Al-Masqati joins us now on the line from Bahrain. He's with the youth movement of Bahrain. Thanks so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about the plans for today.
Actually, I am now near the Burr roundabout. There is a lot of people who slept yesterday inside the roundabout, and they are now gathering and shouting of shut down the regime. Actually, today there is marches. One of marches will going to the Ministry of Justice, so asking to release remaining prisoners who are still in prison in other cases. And one of marching also at 4 o'clock will go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, also asking their same demanding.
If the government releases people who have been arrested or detained, and as we've seen, there's been a cabinet reshuffle, do you think that'll be enough for most people?
No, still not enough, because still some people in prisons, political prisoners, who get a life sentence.
But that is my question, sir. If those political prisoners are released, is that enough, or are your demands that the entire ruling family needs to go?
Actually, it's not enough, because the people are not care of releasing only some of or releasing prisoners. They're asking for their demand. They want their demand. Well, the release prisoner is one of the demand, not all the demands. They're asking the same thing: is they sit down the regime.
All right, Mohammed Al-Masqati, head of the Bahrain Youth Society for Human Rights in Manama. Thanks so much. And powerful tribal chiefs in Yemen have joined anti-government protests. We'll tell you a little bit about that in a moment. But I hear, first of all, we're going to go back to our top story, which we're following here, the developments going on in Libya right now. I believe we have on the line Salah ad-Din. He's a protester, joins us from Benghazi. Thanks so much for being with us. Are people still protesting, or are they celebrating in Benghazi at this point?
Well, actually, I would say they're still protesting because of the mere atrocities that are being carried out in Tripoli and the heavy-handedness of this guy. So it is mixed feelings. They're happy that they are free, but they're very concerned what's going on in the West.
All right, as you are no doubt aware, a rival government has been formed by the former Minister of Justice. How much support is there for him in Libya's second largest city?
In the sense that he's everybody actually has no problems with Mr. Mustafa Abdel-Jalil. He's always been a sound of reason, even during the time that he served the regime. So, yes, there is a support for him.
Now, you said people are very concerned and disturbed by what is going on in the capital. What action, if any, are people taking to try and bring the situation in Tripoli to an end?
Well, they would very much like to go and assist, but I mean, logistically, it's quite difficult simply because still some cities along the way are not in our hands, especially Sirte. So it's very difficult logistically, but they're still trying, I guess. They're still trying, and they were hoping that some sort of help from somewhere in knocking the AlJazeera barracks where he is hiding. But I guess now that the resolution that was passed did not include any use of force, that is for the time being on the back burner.
As you probably know, the UN Security Council has adopted a resolution. Will this give a boost to the morale of the anti-government protesters?
Yes, of course, it's a huge boost. It's a huge boost. The fact that I hear that he was indicted as well. Am I correct in assuming that? As a war criminal.
He hasn't been indicted yet, but he's been the situation has been referred to the International Criminal Court to investigate, which is a process.
Excellent. Excellent. It's as good as being indicted. So that's a huge boost for them because they need to know that the whole world is, going to go after this individual when and if the situation comes down. I guess the most unfortunate thing is he really does have very little choices. He has nowhere to go, and I guess he won't be going anywhere. So he's going to make his last stand there as he's here. So I can honestly say that people will be delighted today of this resolution. It'll be a great boost, and hopefully that will help speed up the liberation of Tripoli.
All right, Salahuddin, good to get your thoughts. Stay with us here in Al Jazeera. The pressure is on for Libya's leader, Muammar Gaddafi, to step down. Even Libya's UN representative describes the country's regime as fascist. Plus,
the Egyptian revolution may be over, but tourism is still decimated. I'm Andrew Simmons on the River Nile at Luxor, where the cruise ships are all at anchor and there isn't a tourist in sight.
It is in the details, a look, a connection, the moments that reveal the truth. Witness documentaries to open your eyes at this time on Al Jazeera.
From local traders to international finance, it's commerce that makes the world go round. For global companies and developing markets, communication is the currency, and information is the most valuable commodity. Counting the cost at this time on Al Jazeera.
The Golan Heights, one of the spoils of the 1967 war, home to 20,000 Israelis and source of 1/3 of all Israel's water. But what of the Syrians left behind? With families torn apart and all borders closed, they come to talk to their loved ones across the Shouting Valley. Across the Shouting Valley on Al Jazeera.
Two generations face the past in order to understand the present. A young man embarks on a journey with